She hadn't spoken in years. He never thought he'd love again. But when fate placed her in his path, both were forced to confront what silence had buried and what healing might still be possible. The girl didn't flinch when the wind tore at her coat. She didn't blink when the horses galloped past or when the man fell from the saddle yards ahead, blood soaking through his shirt. She just stood there, fists clenched at her sides, bare legs bruised and chapped from cold, her small frame barely upright beneath the weight of a world that had never once been kind. She couldn't have been more than 10, maybe less, but her eyes held no youth, no fear, no hope, just silence. Bose Langston wasn't sure what stopped him more, the scream of the rider who hit the ground, or the fact that the girl didn't even look his way. The wagon behind him rattled to a stop as his team pulled up in confusion, snorting against the sudden stillness. Bose swung down, boots sinking deep into the winter-bitten road, his hand automatically brushing the rifle at his side, though no threat seemed present anymore. The rider on the ground was already gone, eyes wide and glassy, a dark bloom soaking the snow beneath him. Robbery gone wrong maybe, or justice delivered. Bose didn't care to guess. What mattered was the girl. She didn't move as he approached. She didn't run, didn't speak, didn't cry. Up close he could see how raw her skin was, how her clothes were little more than rags barely holding together at the seams. There were marks on her wrists, old ones healed wrong. Her lips were cracked and bloodless, and when he spoke she didn't even look at him. Just stared ahead, breathing shallow, like she'd forgotten how to fill her lungs completely. "You with him?" Bose asked gently, nodding toward the dead man. She gave no reply, not even a blink. He crouched, lowering his voice. "What's your name, darlin'?" Nothing. The silence felt loud. Bose swallowed hard. There was something hollow about this child, not in body, though she was clearly starved, but in spirit, like something essential had been burned clean out of her. A woman might have known better than to touch her then, might have kept a respectful distance, but Bose, a widower for nearly 6 years and a father who had buried his own daughter at 7, couldn't stop himself. He reached out slowly, letting her see his hands. No sudden moves, no raised voice, just warmth, a gentle hand brushing the hair from her face. Her eyes finally met his. And Bose Langston, a man who hadn't wept in over a decade, felt his throat tighten like a noose, because there wasn't just pain in those eyes. There was a scream trapped behind them so loud it shook something loose in his own chest. He stood, then shrugged out of his coat. She didn't protest when he draped it over her, didn't flinch, just stood there like a ghost learning how to be alive again. Bose glanced once more at the dead man before scooping the girl gently into his arms. She was light, far too light. The snow began falling again as he placed her in the wagon. His hands were shaking, but not from cold. Back at the homestead, Bose did everything slow. He didn't ask questions, didn't press. He fed her, bathed her, kept the stove burning long into the night. She never spoke, never cried, but she watched. Her eyes followed him everywhere. When he sat, she sat nearby. When he rose, she rose, not out of trust, he could tell, but out of some ancient instinct that told her to study survival wherever it appeared. He gave her the small room across the hall, left the door cracked, made sure the lantern always burned low but steady. The first few nights she didn't sleep, just lay curled on the edge of the bed, her fists balled against her chest. Bose would pass by on his way to the outhouse and see her staring straight at the wall, unblinking. On the 4th night he found her curled up on the floor just outside his door. No blanket, no pillow, just her small frame, sleeping sitting up like a soldier who didn't trust beds. He carried her back gently, didn't say a word. By the 2nd week she started following him outside, only a few feet at first, then to the edge of the porch, then further, out to the stables where he mucked stalls and hauled water. She never helped, never touched a tool, but she watched everything he did with that same piercing focus, like she was collecting proof that he wouldn't hurt her, or that if he did, she'd see it coming this time. Bose started calling her Lily. She didn't object. Whether it was her name or not didn't seem to matter. It was a name that belonged to something gentle, something living, and he needed to speak it aloud just to remember she was real. It wasn't until mid-March when she made a sound. The chickens scattered wrong. Bose turned just in time to see a weasel dart from the coop. He reached for his rifle, too late, and cursed low. But it wasn't the curse that made his heart stop. It was the laugh. A soft, sudden burst of sound behind him, raspy and uncertain like it hadn't been used in years. He turned slowly and saw Lily standing there, hand half over her mouth, eyes wide in surprise at herself. She hadn't meant to laugh. It had snuck out unguarded. Bose didn't say a word, he just smiled. That night she stood in the kitchen beside him while he stirred stew, didn't speak, but didn't leave either. That alone was everything. A week later she screamed. Not a word, just one long, blood-curdling scream that echoed through the cabin like a gunshot. Bose found her in the corner of the room, curled into herself, trembling. It was the thunder, he realized. A storm had rolled in sudden and brutal, shaking the windows with each growl. He didn't touch her, didn't try to quiet her, just sat on the floor near her, speaking softly about nothing at all. The rain, the old roof leak. How the dog they didn't have yet might hate storms too. She didn't stop shaking for an hour, but she didn't run either. The next morning she was gone. The door hung open, the porch empty, her boots, too big and cracked, missing from their place by the fire. Bose's heart kicked hard against his ribs. Not again. He couldn't lose another. He saddled his horse with numb hands and tore into the woods, calling her name. Lily, 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 knowing full well she might not even know it was hers. He found her at the creek. She was barefoot, shivering, eyes locked on the water like it might swallow her whole. Bose didn't speak at first, just waited. Then he took off his own boots and stepped in beside her. "It's cold," he said quietly. She nodded, and then, barely above a whisper, she said her first word. "Used to it." Bose's breath caught. He turned slowly and saw her lip tremble. Her face broke like glass under pressure, and suddenly the flood he'd sensed for weeks came pouring out. She didn't say much, just fragments, enough to paint the edges of the horror. The hands that had grabbed, the words that had shamed, the silence that had been demanded of her. Her stepfather, the man in the snow, and the mother who had closed the door and turned away. Bose didn't speak, didn't touch her. He just stood with her in that freezing creek until her voice broke apart again. Later that night, she slept for the first time with the door fully closed. But the past does not vanish. It waits. And while spring came slow to the mountains, it carried with it the stirrings of things unfinished. Letters went missing. A rider was seen too near the property line too often. And Lily, though she began to smile now and then, flinched every time a shadow passed the window at night. Bose knew the feeling. Because safety wasn't a place. It was a promise, and promises were made to be tested. Spring came like a slow breath. The river thawed first, cracking open with a sound like bones splitting. Then the trees turned greener, one branch at a time. Lily sat on the porch most mornings now, her knees drawn to her chest, her gaze fixed on nothing and everything. She still didn't talk much, but she hummed sometimes. And sometimes, if the wind wasn't too sharp and the air didn't smell too much like whiskey or smoke, she even laughed. Bose had learned not to expect it. But when it came, he let it fill the whole house like a song only they knew. He didn't ask her to do chores, but she started helping anyway, setting the table with those small hands, sweeping ash from the hearth, brushing down the old mule that liked to lean into her like she was its own. She'd gotten strong, too. Her arms no longer looked like twigs. Her steps didn't falter the way they used to. Bose would catch her sometimes lifting the water bucket by herself, her jaw set tight like she had something to prove. He never stopped her. But he watched always. Because he'd seen storms break and skies clear before, only to return just as fast with teeth sharper than before. Healing was never a straight line, and Lily, for all her quiet determination, carried too much to ever be called safe. Then came the letter. Bose found it on the fence post, no rider, no sign of who left it. just a piece of rough paper weighted by a stone. The handwriting was tight, the kind a man uses when he wants to be sure he's read. There was no name, just 2 lines. "She's mine by law, you've stolen her. I'll be coming soon." Bose read it once, then burned it in the stove, but the message didn't leave his mind. That night, Lily stayed up late sketching in the dust on the windowsill with her fingertip. She didn't ask why Bose double-checked the locks or why he moved the rifle closer to the door, but her eyes followed him again, just like they had in the beginning. 2 days passed with no trouble, then 4, a week. The sky stayed blue, the creek bubbled soft. Lily asked, unprompted, if the mule had a name. Bose told her not yet, and she grinned almost mischievously before announcing it was now Buttercup. He didn't argue. Buttercup she was. He thought maybe the letter had been a bluff. Then the chickens were found dead, throats slit, feathers scattered like a warning. No tracks, no signs, just silence. The kind that made Bose's gut tighten. He didn't tell Lily, just told her to sleep with the door locked and stay inside when he was gone to town. She nodded, eyes darker than they'd been all week. She understood without needing it explained. The next day, he went to the sheriff. But the law in their part of the territory was a loose thing. Sheriff Cordell was old, lazy, and made of more excuses than grit. He rubbed his mustache when Bose laid out the story and asked real slow, "You got proof this man's coming back?" "No," Bose replied, "but I got a girl with scars and a warning left on my fence." Cordell shrugged. "Warnings ain't crimes. If he steps on your land, that's different. But till then, best you keep watch." Bose didn't bother arguing. He just nodded and walked out. But something clenched tight in his chest, and it didn't ease even when he returned home to find Lily safe and waiting on the porch, holding a bowl of shelled peas like she'd never been taught to fear the world. That night she spoke a little more than usual, asked him about his wife, what her name was, what she liked to do. Bose didn't hesitate. "Sarah," he said. "She liked to sing while sweeping, thought it'd scare the dust away." Lily smiled. "I think it worked." He smiled too, but it didn't reach all the way. He didn't tell her that Sarah had died trying to give birth to the daughter they never got to raise. That for years after, Bose had buried himself in work, in silence, in whatever cold thing let him survive without feeling too much. He didn't say any of that, because the moment felt too full already. Later, Bose sat on the porch long after Lily had gone to bed. He watched the woods, listened for sounds that didn't belong, wind, crickets, the occasional owl. And then a cough, low, deliberate, coming from the trees. He stood slowly, didn't reach for the rifle right away, just listened. The cough came again, then a voice. "She always was a quiet thing," the voice drawled. "Didn't cry much, didn't fight, just took it, like she knew it was what girls like her are for." Bose moved faster than he had in years. He was down the steps, rifle in hand, eyes scanning the dark. But there was no one, just the echo of the voice. He didn't sleep that night. Sat in the rocker, gun across his lap, eyes trained on the tree line. Come morning, Lily noticed. She didn't ask, but she made an extra biscuit and set it quietly beside him before heading to the stable, her way of saying, "I know." And Bose, whose heart had been sealed tight since burying his wife, felt something shift again. Not crack, not yet, but shift. The next few days passed in uneasy calm. Lily grew bolder, started reading aloud from one of the old books Bose had kept for years, her voice soft and halting but steady. She liked the ones with animals, especially the bear who wore a red scarf and outsmarted hunters. But Bose noticed the signs. A fence rail broken in two, the sound of hooves in the night, a dead rabbit strung upside down on the porch, its blood spelling out one word. Mine. He cleaned it up before Lily saw, buried the rabbit deep and salted the ground. The past wasn't circling anymore, it was knocking. That night Bose didn't sleep again. Lily did, though, peacefully. and maybe that was why the guilt twisted in his gut like a knife. Because he'd seen it coming, and still he hadn't stopped it. The fire was set at dawn. Smoke poured into the kitchen before the rooster crowed. Bose woke choking, Lily screaming from her room. Flames danced across the porch. Someone had doused the steps with oil. The barn was already gone. He grabbed her without a word, wrapped her in a blanket, and kicked out the back door just as the roof began to groan. They ran through the snow-melted mud, past the burning coop, past Buttercup, thank God, unscathed and tied further off, and into the woods. They didn't stop running until the cabin was just a glow on the horizon. Only then did Lily speak. "Matthew," she said, breathless. "His name is Matthew." Bose didn't need more. The rest wrote itself in fire and smoke. Matthew, the stepfather, the man who had hurt her, the man who had taken everything and claimed it as his own, the man who had left her broken and now wanted to finish the job. They found shelter in an old miner's shack, long abandoned, half collapsed, but with a roof strong enough to keep them dry. Bose kept a fire going low and steady. Lily didn't cry, but she sat beside him like a child trying to remember how not to disappear. For days they stayed there, waiting, listening. Bose left only once to ride to town and send a telegram to a man he hadn't spoken to in years. It simply said, "Need help, come fast, bring fire." Lily watched him sharpen a blade that night. Her voice broke the quiet. "You gonna kill him?" Bose didn't look up. "Not if I don't have to." She nodded. "But if you do?" He finally looked at her. "I'll protect what's mine," he said. She didn't smile, but she didn't look away either. The past was coming. And this time it was bringing matches. They waited 6 days in that broken miner's shack. 6 days of smoke-stained clothes and water hauled in from the stream, and Lily sleeping curled against the wall with one eye always half open. The floor sloped hard to the left, and the roof leaked when the wind came from the north, but Bose kept the fire steady. The mule, Buttercup, tied under a lean-to Bose rigged from scrap wood, gave them milk and warmth. It was barely enough, but it was enough. Each morning Bose rose early and circled the perimeter. Tracks showed sometimes. Boots too large to be Lily's, too careless to be his. Once he found a scrap of cloth, blue gingham, torn and wet. Another time a spent match crushed into mud. Matthew Crowley wasn't just hunting. He was circling, watching, waiting. But Bose wasn't alone anymore. On the 7th morning, Bose returned from his sweep and found Lily kneeling beside the fire, coaxing life into the embers. She looked up only once. "They're closer today," she said. It wasn't a question. It wasn't fear, just fact. Bose nodded. He hadn't told her what he saw, but she knew. Of course she did. Lily didn't ask where he went every morning, didn't ask what kind of trap he was setting, or why he left the door unlocked when he slept. But she noticed everything, and more than that, she understood. Bose reached into his coat and pulled out a strip of jerky, handing it over without a word. She took it and sat cross-legged, chewing slow. Neither of them spoke, but silence had never been empty between them. It had always said more than words could. By midday the wind shifted, not from the north this time, but from the west, carrying with it the scent of sweat, saddle leather, and gun oil. Bose stiffened. The mule snorted. Lily looked up sharply. "They're here," she said again. Bose didn't argue. He took her by the shoulder and guided her toward the crawlspace behind the rotted pantry shelf. A tight space, half dug and full of dust, but hidden. The kind of space only a man who'd once dug graves by hand would have thought to use. He crouched beside her. "You stay, no matter what." Her jaw tightened. "I don't want to hide." "I know," he said softly, "but it's not hiding, it's surviving." Her eyes flicked toward the crack in the wood. She nodded once. Bose moved fast, covered the entrance, killed the fire, smeared soot over the window, then he stepped outside into the light and waited. The The sound of hooves came slow and steady. 3 riders. He recognized the first before he even spoke. Matthew Crowley still sat too straight in his saddle, the kind of posture you don't earn working land but wielding control. His coat was cleaner than it should have been, boots polished, face smug. The other 2 were lean and mean, faces like stretched leather, eyes constantly scanning. Bose stepped out into view, empty hands visible. Matthew reined in his horse and grinned. Well, well, look at this. I figured you'd run further. Bose didn't smile, didn't run, just waiting. Matthew dismounted slowly, like he expected applause. You've got something of mine. Bose didn't answer. The wind answered for him, brushing dead leaves across the clearing. Matthew sighed. Look, I get it, she's a pretty little thing, sweet, quiet, you probably think you're doing the right thing, saving her from the big bad man. He spread his arms mockingly. But the law's on my side, she's mine, raised her myself since she was 3. Bose said nothing. Matthew's voice dropped lower. Now, I don't mind a little trouble. I don't even mind you teaching her to read or brush horses or whatever righteous nonsense you're filling her head with. But she comes back with me. Today. Bose finally spoke. You don't raise a child by breaking her. Matthew's jaw twitched. You don't know a damn thing about it. Bose looked him full in the face. I know she's terrified of thunder. I know she sleeps better when there's light in the hall. I know she flinches at certain words and won't eat anything with onions, because that's what you always made her clean out of your boots when you were drunk. The silence that followed was sharp. Matthew stepped forward, hand twitching near his belt. You done spying on me, old man? I've been listening, Bose said calmly. She didn't tell me she didn't need to. Matthew smiled again, but it didn't reach his eyes. You think this ends with a lecture. You think you'll scare me with big words and bigger looks. I've already burned your house. Don't think I won't burn what's left of you too. Bose didn't move, then try. Matthew signaled. The men flanked him, drew guns. But Bose didn't flinch. The rifle hidden under the porch, rigged with a tripwire, fired first. One rider went down hard, shoulder torn open. The second raised his gun, only to be hit square in the face with a shovel swung from the woods behind. Bose's friend, Elijah Vance, former Union scout, stepped into view with a calm that could freeze rivers. Told you I'd bring fire, Elijah muttered. Matthew stumbled back, gun half raised, but Bose was already moving. In 2 strides he had the pistol kicked from Matthew's grip and his knee buried deep in the man's gut. Matthew dropped, gasping, face twisted in fury. I'll find her, he spat. You think you can hide her forever? Bose crouched low beside him, voice quiet but sharp as broken glass. She's not hiding anymore. She's choosing, and she chooses not to be yours. Matthew laughed, bitter and breathless. You think you've won. She's marked, Langston. Whatever you do, she'll still carry me. Bose didn't blink. Maybe, but from now on she'll carry other things too. He stood. Elijah tied the remaining conscious man to a post and glanced at Bose. Sheriff. Bose nodded. If Cordell won't hang him, someone else will. They left them there, tied, broken, waiting for judgment to catch up. Inside the shack, Lily crawled from her hiding place. Her face was pale, but her eyes were calm. You didn't shoot him, she said. No. Why? Bose poured water into a tin cup and handed it to her. Because you're not just what he did to you, and I'm not just what he tried to make me either. She drank slowly. Outside, the world breathed again. The rest of the day was quiet. Elijah helped them patch the shack better, brought supplies from his own place farther downriver. They shared bread and beans that night. Lily didn't speak much, but she sat beside Elijah with open curiosity, asked him if he'd ever seen the ocean. He smiled. Once, smelled like old fish and wind. She nodded solemnly. I think I'd like it. Before bed, Bose found her sitting on the step. "Do you think he'll come back?" she asked, voice small. "No," Bose said, "but if he does, he won't find the same girl." She looked up. "What girl will he find?" Bose looked at her a long time. "A free one." She nodded. That seemed to be enough. And yet even as the wind died and the fire burned low and peace finally seemed possible, Bose couldn't shake the feeling in his bones. This wasn't the end. It never was. The shack held through the rest of spring. It sagged with every rainstorm, groaned when the wind swept up from the west, and always smelled faintly of mildew no matter how many times Lily scrubbed the floor. But it stood, and for the first time in either of their lives, that seemed like a kind of triumph. Elijah came by every few days, sometimes bringing salt or coffee, other times just stories, half-true tales about mountain ghosts and horses that could outrun thunder. Lily listened in silence, eyes wide, her fingers plucking at a loose thread in her skirt. She didn't laugh often, not yet, but sometimes when Elijah mimed being chased by a mule with a bad attitude, her mouth would twitch just slightly, and Bose would feel something shift in the room, like light finding its way through a long-sealed window. They worked because work was all they had. Bose chopped wood and patched the roof with bark and tar he boiled down himself. Lily gathered berries, rinsed laundry in the stream, and fed Buttercup scraps when the mule whined loud enough. She rarely touched tools, not unless Bose handed them over with both patience and distance. Even then, her grip was cautious, like she expected the handle to bite. She was learning to sleep again, too, not all the way through, not without starting at every owl hoot or cracking branch, but enough. And when nightmares came, which they always did, she no longer hid them behind silence. Some nights she'd wake up crying, teeth clenched tight, and Bose would sit on the other side of the wall, speaking softly until her breathing slowed. One night she knocked on his door. Not a scream, not a cry, just a knock. Bose opened it and found her standing there in her nightgown, bare feet trembling against the floor. "Can I?" she began, voice breaking. "Just sit." He stepped aside. She sat on the floor, knees pulled to her chest, head resting against the wall. Neither of them said much, just shared the silence like a warm quilt. In the morning she was gone, already at the stream rinsing potatoes, her hair braided and her shoulders squared like nothing had happened. Bose said nothing. She liked it that way. Still, he watched her closer after that. Watched the way she flinched when a bird took flight too suddenly. The way she tensed if he raised his voice, even when laughing. The way she stared at her own hands sometimes like they weren't hers. Some wounds didn't scar, they stayed open, quiet, waiting. Bose knew that too well. The day they decided to leave the shack, the sky was nearly white with heat. Spring had crept into early summer, and with it came biting flies and the sour smell of old damp walls. They packed slowly. Bose wanted to rebuild the old house, the one Matthew had burned to ash. He hadn't been back since that night, but the land was still theirs. And there was something to be said for claiming it again, not as a place of memory, but one of future. Lily didn't speak as they rode. She sat behind Bose on Buttercup, arms wrapped loosely around his waist, eyes trained on the trail ahead. It wasn't fear, not anymore, it was anticipation. When they reached the clearing, what remained of the house was blackened beams and charred stone. Smoke scars still marked the trees, and the ground held a faint scent of ruin. Bose dismounted, lifting Lily down after him. She stood beside him, eyes scanning every inch. Then she walked forward, stopped where the porch used to be, and crouched low. Bose watched her press her palm into the earth, then draw a small, careful line through the soot. A letter. B. Then an O. He realized she was spelling his name. When she looked back at him, her eyes were unreadable. "I want to stay here," she said. Bose swallowed. "You sure?" She nodded. "It's where it ended, so it should be where it begins too." So they rebuilt. Elijah helped where he could, bringing boards and nails scavenged from an old barn he'd found rotting in the hills. Bose taught Lily how to hold a hammer, how to press it firm into the palm, not like a weapon but like a promise. At first she struggled, her swings weak and off-angle, but she refused to quit. Her hands blistered, bled, then healed. One day she drove a nail in clean with one strike and looked up, grinning with teeth. Bose grinned back. The house came together slow. A single room first, with a stone hearth and a thick roof of cedar shingles. Then a lean-to for supplies. Then the second room, hers. Lily chose the corner, placed her cot beneath the window, and lined up her books in a neat row beneath the sill. One afternoon, as they finished shingling the last beam, a rider came up the trail. Bose reached for his rifle before realizing it wasn't danger. It was the sheriff. Cordell, sweating under his vest, huffing like he'd ridden too fast and hadn't stopped for water. He dismounted awkwardly and removed his hat. "I figured you ought to know," he said without preamble. "Crowley's dead, stabbed in prison." Bose didn't flinch. "By who?" Cordell shrugged. "Didn't ask. Man like that wouldn't be short of enemies." Lily had stepped into the doorway behind Bose, her face blank. Cordell saw her, tipped his hat, sorry for what he was. She didn't reply, just turned and walked back inside. That night, Bose found her on the porch again. She didn't speak for a long time. Then, "It doesn't change anything." He looked at her. "What does?" "That he's dead. I still feel like I'm running." Bose sat beside her. "Maybe you will be for a while." She looked over. "Is that what you do?" He paused. "Some days, but not always. Some days I just live, and on the good ones I remember why." They watched the stars come out together. The wind was soft. The world didn't feel heavy for once. Lily leaned her head lightly against his shoulder. She didn't say thank you. She didn't need to. The next few weeks passed with rhythm. Mornings were for chores, afternoons for books or hunting or riding the trails. Lily grew taller. Her face filled out. She smiled more now, quiet, private smiles like little victories she chose to share. But healing isn't a straight path. One night she woke screaming again. This time not a nightmare, but a flash of memory. Bose found her outside, barefoot in the dirt, tears streaking her face. "I remembered something," she whispered. "A sound he made when he locked the door. It's been stuck in my head all day. I couldn't get it out." Bose didn't touch her. He just said, "Then let's replace it." She looked up, confused. "Let's make a new sound," he said, "one you get to keep." He took a nail, walked to the porch beam, and drove it into the wood with a single, solid hit. It rang loud and sharp through the night. He looked at her. "Your turn." She took the hammer, hands shaking. Then struck. Again and again. Until the sound that haunted her was buried beneath a new one. That night she slept all the way through. When Elijah returned the next morning, she ran to greet him. Bose stood back, arms crossed, watching them. Elijah caught Bose's eye and nodded, slow. "You done good, Langston," he said later over coffee. Bose stared into the steam. "She's doing it, I'm just here." That's more than most. They didn't talk about the scars that stayed, or the road still ahead. But they didn't need to. Because in a valley that had once burned, laughter now echoed. And that, more than revenge, more than safety, was what survival really looked like. By the middle of summer, Lily knew every trail behind the ridge in which streams ran coldest even after the sun rose high. She started climbing trees too, first low, hesitantly, then higher, until her feet dangled from branches Bose used to warn her away from. She'd wave down at him, daring him to stop her, and he'd just shake his head with that rare, dry smile that didn't need much showing. He didn't stop her, not once. Because that was the point. Let her be bold now. Let her touch freedom like it was hers to keep. She'd earned it 1,000 times over. Still, as the days stretched longer and the nights grew warm enough to leave the windows open, Bose began to see something stir beneath her calm. At first, it was subtle, a a tightness to her shoulders that hadn't been there last week, a sudden stillness in her hands while cutting potatoes. She laughed less, walked quieter, and sometimes, when she thought he wasn't watching, she'd sit on the floor beside her bed and stare into the corner as if something lived there. Bose didn't ask. Not yet. Then one evening, Lily didn't come home by sundown. That had never happened before. Bose checked the trails, the creek, the meadow where she picked wildflowers for the mule. Nothing, no tracks, just empty paths and the strange hush of woods holding their breath. By nightfall, his chest had begun to burn in a way he hadn't felt since Sarah bled out in his arms all those years ago. It wasn't panic. Not exactly. It was memory. The cruel kind. The kind that told him people leave and they don't always get to say goodbye first. Then he heard the door creak. Lily stepped in, mud up to her knees, scratches on her arms, eyes too wide. I went to the hollow, she said simply. Bose froze. What hollow? The one near where the shack was, where the fire started. His breath caught. Why? She looked at him then, and the weight of it nearly took him to his knees. Because I needed to remember what was real and what wasn't. She sat down right there on the floor, dirty and shaking, and didn't say another word. Bose lit the lamp, knelt beside her, and waited. He'd learned long ago not to press. Finally she spoke. I keep hearing his voice, even now, even with him dead. I keep seeing the look on his face when he'd reach for the key, and I'd pretend I was asleep just to, her voice broke. But it didn't matter. He always opened the door. Her body folded in on itself, but she didn't cry. Not like before. This wasn't panic. It was grief. The kind that came slow, long after the wound should have healed. Bose didn't touch her, but he sat with her all night. No fire, no words. Just the two of them on the floor, side by side, until the sun broke over the hills and bled gold across the floorboards. Lily stood first. She walked to the stove, washed her hands, started breakfast like she always did. But something in her had shifted. She spoke less the next few days, moved slower. There were no nightmares, but there were silences sharp enough to bleed a man. Bose began to worry. Until one morning she brought out the old crate from under her bed, the one she never let anyone touch. Inside were torn pieces of her childhood, a hair ribbon, a cracked teacup, a photograph of a woman who must have been her mother. And a journal. She laid it on the table and looked at Bose. I want to write it down. He nodded. She did. Each day she wrote a little, sometimes shaking, sometimes steady, but always with fire in her eyes, and when she couldn't write she drew sketches of places she remembered, the locked attic, the cupboard under the stairs, the shape of Matthew's boots. She put everything in ink. Some nights she left the pages open on the table, as if inviting the ghosts to see themselves laid bare. One evening, Bose picked up the journal. He only read a page. It was enough. Enough to know the strength it took just to survive a single day in that man's house. Enough to know Lily had fought harder than most men would have survived. When he put the journal down, she was watching. I thought if I wrote it, I could make it smaller, she said. Did it work? She didn't answer, but the next morning she went riding alone again. And that afternoon she cut her hair. Bose found her on the porch steps, red strands scattered around her feet, scissors still in hand. She looked up. It was the last thing he touched. Bose didn't ask how. He didn't need to. She stood. You've given me a home, but I think I need to know what I'd be without it too. He studied her face. You mean to leave? She shook her head. I mean to walk away for a while, to see if I can stand without shaking. He nodded slowly. You'll come back. I think so, she said, but only if I want to, not because I owe you anything. Bose smiled faintly. That's how you'll know it's real. The next morning Lily packed only a small sack, bread, a canteen, her journal. No gun, no knife. Just courage. Bose saddled Buttercup himself. Lily turned once at the edge of the trail. You think I'm strong enough? I think you've been strong for a long time, he said. Now you get to be free too. She nodded, then rode. Bose watched until she vanished behind the pines. And then he sat on the porch alone, the sun warming his shoulders, and waited. Not for her return, that would be her choice. He waited to see what kind of world she would make without fear. And if it ever tried to take her again, he'd be ready. Lily had no map, no clear destination. She rode with the rising sun at her back and trusted that the land would teach her what she needed to know. Buttercup trotted along without complaint, and in the quiet between her breaths, Lily felt the first honest taste of solitude. Not silence. The silence she'd known in that attic wasn't real, it was suffocating. This was something else. This was the kind of quiet that let you listen to yourself. The first town she came to was called Dagger's Hollow, a forgotten stopover carved into the edge of a canyon. The air smelled like hot rock and dry pine, and the people there talked with short words and eyes that didn't linger. She tied Buttercup outside the general store and stepped in, boots coated in trail dust, her hair uneven and falling into her eyes. No one looked twice. That felt like a kind of gift. The woman behind the counter introduced herself as Miss June, offered a cup of weak coffee and a biscuit without asking where Lily came from or where she was headed. She just looked at her, long and slow, and said, "You've been through it." Lily didn't deny it. Miss June didn't press. She spent 3 nights in Dagger's Hollow, sleeping in the barn behind the store, sweeping the floor in exchange for meals. She liked it there, the rhythm, the simplicity, but she knew it wasn't her place to stay. Bose had taught her the difference between rest and running, and she wasn't running now. She was still walking, forward and alone, because something inside her still needed to be tested. The next town was colder, higher up Pine Hill. It was a mining place, rough and mean around the edges. Men drank before noon, and the women either spoke with flint in their voices or didn't speak at all. Lily found work at a stable, cleaning stalls, brushing horses, hauling water, and didn't ask questions when the foreman stared too long or muttered under his breath. She kept her eyes low but her shoulders square. One night late, she walked into the saloon, not for the drink, but because she was tired of pretending she didn't deserve to take up space. The piano was off-key, the laughter was sour, but no one stopped her. She sat at the end of the bar, asked for water and listened. That's when she heard the name. Not Matthew, that part of her life was dead now. No, this was a different name, one she hadn't heard before, Josiah Burke. "Heard he's gathering people," the man beside her muttered. "Buying loyalty like it's cattle, wants the land east of here, wants every road between Sylvie Run and the border." Lily didn't react, but her breath caught. Sylvie Run was near where Bose lived, near their house, their valley. Josiah Burke, a stranger, but men like that didn't need personal histories to do damage. They came like fire, wide and hungry, and they never asked what might already be burning. She finished her water, left a coin she didn't owe, and walked out. She stayed up that night in the hayloft, eyes open to the rafters, wondering whether she should turn back, whether going back would mean surrendering the independence she just fought to earn. But that wasn't the question. The question was whether freedom meant anything if she didn't use it to protect the place, and the person who had given her the chance to find it. By morning, she was riding again. She didn't rush, not exactly, but her hands shook more now, and each mile felt longer. The wind had changed too, hotter, drier, and sharp at the edges, like something was waiting to crack. She arrived back in the valley on the 4th day. Bose was out front patching a fence. He didn't look surprised when she rode in, just wiped his brow and said, "You took the long way home." She dismounted, stood before him, suddenly uncertain again. "I heard something," she said. He waited. "A man named Josiah Burke, he's headed this way, wants land. Bose didn't blink, I know. She stared, you know. Word travels, he said. Elijah heard it from a trader last week. Lily took a step closer. What are we going to do? Bose's gaze was steady. That depends, do you want to fight? She opened her mouth, then closed it. I want to protect it, she said at last. Not just the land, what it means. Bose nodded. Then we build higher fences. But it wasn't fences that Burke tested. The first sign came in the form of smoke, not from the house but from the woods behind the ridge. A hunting camp, marked with Burke's brand on the trees, a crude bee slashed deep with a knife. Elijah rode out that night, said the men were already drinking, laughing, boasting about how they'd take the valley one ranch at a time. Bose watched Lily carefully after that, expected her to fold, retreat. She didn't. She stayed close, asked questions, studied maps. And when he told her it might come to force, not guns maybe, but threats, she didn't flinch. I know what it's like to be owned, she said. I won't let it happen again. Then one morning, a man came to the door. He was younger than Bose, but older than Lily, tall and too clean. His voice was polite, but his smile didn't reach his eyes. Mr. Langston, he said, Mr. Burke would like to purchase your land. Bose shook his head before the man finished speaking. It's not for sale. The man smiled wider. Everything has a price. Lily stepped forward then. No, she said. Some things just have a past, and if you take them, that past becomes yours. The man studied her a moment, then left. But Bose saw the shift. They'll come harder next time. Lily nodded. Let them. That night Bose showed her the trap lines, the signals, the lantern system he and Elijah had set up for emergencies. He expected her to be afraid. She was. She was calm, watchful. The valley had given her peace. Now she'd give it teeth. But the threat didn't come as a charge or a gunfight. It came in the form of fire. Bose saw it first, smoke rising from the north trail. Not natural, not lightning, controlled and creeping. A signal. A warning. He grabbed his rifle. Lily already had the mule loaded with water and blankets. They reached the ridge, just in time to see the trees blaze. Elijah was already there, eyes red from the smoke. Cut fire breaks, he barked. Now. Lily didn't hesitate. She swung the axe like she'd been doing it her whole life, clearing brush, digging trenches. Sweat poured down her back and her hands split open, but she didn't stop. They fought the fire all night. And in the end, it stopped 10 feet from the house. Bose stood at the edge of the burn line, chest heaving. Lily came up beside him, face streaked with soot. They're testing us, she said. He nodded. Then we show them we don't break. But he saw it now, what she'd become. Not a girl escaping pain. A woman defending something worth keeping. The fire changed more than just the shape of the trees. Ash clung to everything for days, fine and gray like powdered bone. It seeped into their clothes, their hair, the corners of the cabin. Bose could taste it in the back of his throat when he spoke, and Lily sometimes woke in the night coughing, pressing a damp cloth over her mouth as though choking on memories. But the cabin still stood. The valley still held. And after a week the rains came. It was a slow, warm rain, summer rain that didn't lash or roar but crept gently down leaves, soaked roots, washed the ash from their skin. Lily stood outside when it began, arms open, face tilted toward the sky. Bose watched her from the porch, a quiet stillness in his chest that had nothing to do with caution. She looked like something made new. You think they'll come back? She asked that night as they sat on the porch, steam rising off the wet grass. Bose nodded. If not this season, then next. She turned toward him. Then we'll be ready again. He studied her face. She didn't flinch anymore, not at thunder, not at raised voices, not even at silence. Something in her had settled, like a wheel finally catching on solid ground after years of spinning through mud. They spent the next days clearing the fire damage. Elijah came and helped fell the worst of the burnt trees. His voice was rougher now, his limp more pronounced, but he worked with a steadiness that kept them grounded. Bose noticed Lily began to hum again, just low and soft. At first he couldn't place the tune, but one evening, as the wind died and the moon broke through, he recognized it. It was the same lullaby she'd once hummed in the shack, the same one she'd tried to sing to herself during the worst nights. Now it didn't sound like survival. Now it sounded like peace. They kept building. Lily dug a garden behind the house. She planted tomatoes, squash, and wild herbs she'd learned to recognize during her time away. She named the rows. She drew signs. She even carved a little wooden fence to keep the mule out, not that Buttercup paid much attention. Bose expanded the tool shed, fixed the roof, taught her how to clean the rifle properly. Not because he thought she needed it, but because she asked. "Knowing how to hold it makes me feel like I don't need it," she said once. He nodded. He understood that better than most. One day, weeks after the fire, a letter arrived. Elijah handed it to Lily without a word. It was from the sheriff in Sylvirun. Bose recognized the seal. Josiah Burke had been found dead, knife wound to the chest. No suspects, no witnesses, just a body dumped outside the mayor's barn with the words "No more chains" carved into the dirt beside it. Bose watched Lily's reaction. She didn't cheer, she didn't tremble. She just folded the letter and placed it under a stone on the porch railing, then returned to pulling weeds from the tomato bed. Later she looked at him. "I didn't need him to die," she said, "but I'm glad I don't have to hear his name again." Bose didn't speak. Because what was there to say? Peace was never about erasing the past. It was about deciding it wouldn't own you anymore. Autumn came gently that year. The trees that had survived the fire turned gold and red like they were trying to outshine the damage. The house felt fuller now, not just in size but in rhythm. There was life here, patterns, morning coffee, evening stew, the sound of pages turning after supper, the faint hum of Lily's voice echoing through the rafters. Then came a day Bose hadn't known how to prepare for. He walked in to find Lily standing by the table, holding a sack. It was half full, a loaf of bread, some dried fruit, a change of clothes. She didn't look nervous. "I think it's time I tried living somewhere else for a while," she said. Bose felt something in him stop moving. She stepped closer. "I'm not running, I'm not scared, I just want to see who I am out there, without the shadow of what happened, without you carrying the weight for me." He nodded slowly, throat tight. "I know." She studied him for a long moment. "You ever think about leaving?" "Once," he admitted. "Long time ago, but then the right person knocked on my door." She smiled at that. "I was a mess." He smiled back, "And still worth answering for." They didn't hug, not then, not quite. But when she reached the trail and turned for one last glance, Bose raised his hand in a silent wave. She raised hers too. And then she was gone. The days grew quiet again. The house didn't feel empty, just different. Bose worked, cooked, rode out to the ridge sometimes just to listen to the wind. Every once in a while Elijah would stop by with a letter. Never long, never dramatic, just updates. Lily was in Cliffhaven for a while, working at a print shop. Then she'd moved farther west, near a school. She didn't say she missed him, but she always asked if the valley still smelled like cedar after rain, and always signed her name the same way. Lily Wren Langston. The first time he saw it, he had to sit down. He never asked her when she started using his name. He never asked what it meant. Because maybe it wasn't about answers anymore. Maybe it was just about letting something grow where only ash had been. And then one spring, just as the thaw reached the creeks and the mule began pacing with restlessness again, he heard the knock. Not weak, not desperate. Just sure. He opened the door. She stood there taller now, her shoulders square, her hands strong. Behind her stood a boy, 8 or 9, with sharp eyes and untidy hair. "This is Micah," she said. "He needed a place to start again." Bo stepped aside. "Then he's come to the right one." They came in together. The fire burned, the house held. And just like that, it began again. Not from scratch, but from roots strong enough to hold through every storm.